Okay, let's wait for a moment. Well, you don't have to read that. It's just where I'm coming from. So my name is Matthias. Welcome, everyone. I'm from Germany, Leipzig. I'm also at my day job developer advocate for JetBrains. I'm quite interested in developer tools in general, even before I joined JetBrains. I also consider myself a DevOps enthusiast. That is basically my open source project that I maintain for quite a while. And because of that, I also like to think, although there are plenty of others who are way better than me, to be an open source evangelist. But yeah, I'm here, I'm talking a bit about open source, so maybe that counts. So let me start by diving a little bit into my open source resume, so where I'm coming from. At first, and that was in 2012 or something, I was basically just a consumer of NuGet packages. Yeah? Something other people built, I was just consuming it, be done. After that, I joined another company right after my thesis and was suddenly a contributor to an open source project that a company maintained. That open source project was really just, it's called auxiliary project because it really just, yeah, it was a byproduct, so to say, of their projects that they did. But still quite important. I think it was even used in Entity Framework at some point, but yeah, I think at least. Then I became the creator and maintainer of something that I call TestFX, and that was kind of motivated through the work that I did at the company. Yeah, so I thought, okay, we could write tests a little bit better, and so TestFX was born. But I did it really on the side. And then, and I should also say that was 2 or 3 years or something like that. Really not successful, but I still enjoyed it because it was kind of a bit like research in terms of test frameworks. And then I started another project, which is called Nuke, and that was really just a hobby project, so it didn't have any connection with my work whatsoever. At that time, I worked at JetBrains already. And again, it gained a lot of traction, actually. And yeah, really some nice things happened after that. What I want to disclose really is, now I'm speaking about open source, but I'm really not the open source spokesman or anything. So to be quite honest, in the early days when I was really just a consumer, I would consider myself from that point in time right now as entitled, although not as bad as you might think. But yeah, I also learned a thing or two. Other maintainers definitely might have another view on things. Yeah, I would consider myself as being a bit more strict about how I lead the project and all. But I think you will also notice throughout the presentation of what I mean. Okay, so not a spokesperson. Yeah. As far as the agenda goes, so first we will look at what is open source actually, how it developed over time, then the good and the bad, and followed by tips for maintainers and consumers. And before I forget this, although the portion for maintainers is quite large, this is by no means, you don't really have to be a maintainer. Even as a contributor or something, you can actually help a project with some of these points maybe. So let's go. What is open source? A brief look at the history. So in the 50s, virtually all software was public domain at first, yeah? Followed by the first proprietary software which was distributed with the source code, actually. And later on, source code was deemed copyrightable. So usually those rulings, they stem from the US, but you know, US rulings, they are also quite important for us or for the whole world. So yeah, source code was deemed copyrightable. And with that, the shipping of source code actually fades a bit. Yeah? Less and less software is distributed with source code. Later on, also object code is considered copyrightable. That is that part that today we consider as don't decompile whatever software you have. Although in some countries you still can if it's for educational purpose and stuff like that. So jurisdiction is quite important. And with that, also the GNU and free software movement started. Yeah? So page 2 for this. In 1991, we saw the first Linux release, open source operating system. And with that, also the rise of many open source projects. Some examples for that are Apache HTTP Server, MySQL, PHP, and Perl, just to name a few. And in the late 90s, Microsoft recognizes this threat. I think I don't need to say anything more, about the Bomber time and stuff like that. And with the 2000s, open source basically breaches into the enterprise. Yeah, everything's, yeah, sure, this project looks nice, I can use that, it's helpful. And more projects or open source becomes mainstream with more and more projects. For this time, I'm thinking about projects like Docker or Ansible or the NoSQL movement. And in these times, just, 3 years ago, pretty much everyone uses open source, yeah, in their projects. Hands up who uses open source in their company. Let's see some hands. Okay. This page doesn't verify actually because it should be 5% not raising their hand. So I will guess you're just maybe a bit tired still. But yeah, I think plenty of, that's some research. A lot of companies are using open source, at least for internal reasons, but then also a bit more for public code. So I hope you can you read it? So up here, that is for internal use or non-commercial use, and the second line is for commercial products. And pretty much just the from white to gray that you could consider no one is using open source. But the rest, the blue part, they're using open source. So open source is everywhere. And unfortunately, I never found a source for that, but one of my colleagues was having a webinar, and there is some source for that, I'm sure. But roughly, companies save roughly 60 billion per year. What they use for open source, what they don't have to invest into commercial software to buy. Yeah, and that comes with lower cost of ownership, of course. Someone else is doing that. No licensing fees, rapid innovation also because someone else is doing that. But saving that amount of money also means that someone else is not getting it. Yeah, so someone still has to pay with their time as a maintainer. Also, what's good to know, I think, is the open source initiative, short OSI, and that originated from the idea of sharing with mates. Yeah, that's also how I started. I love what I was doing. I know I'm good with build automation and stuff, and I wanted others to profit from that as well. Yeah. With that, proprietary software was also considered somewhat of an enemy, you could say. I think that's fair to say. Open source is a trademark, actually. So, yeah. And there are also, that's also good to know, OSI-approved licenses. Usually they have some they're a bit different, but usually they have points like free distribution, source code is available, derivatives are allowed, so you can build on top of that. No limitations on usage usually. And some examples would be GPL, Apache, MIT, BSD. I think you've heard about them. The main idea for them is to release maintainers from liability and to give freedom of consumption. Yeah, so that is the microscope through what we are looking. Types of open source, also very briefly, I already mentioned hobbyist project is something that you really do on the side. It has no relation with your work. Side gigs are motivated by work stuff, but work says, we don't want to put time in it, but you say, I want to put time in it. Then there are auxiliary projects, those where open source is just a byproduct. And that's the top of the hill, professional projects where really a company is working on a project which is open source, but still they make money with it through different ways. What's interesting about these different types of projects is that they have a varying business alignment and also truck factor. Yeah? So truck factor, I think, is everyone is familiar. Number of people who need to get hit by a bus so that the project dies, and the person. But yeah, with a hobbyist project, that's really the business alignment is not there, and the truck factor very low. So yeah, I think you get where I'm going here. Actors in open source, maintainers, consumers, contributors, although that's still a small portion, I think. There are plenty of more, actually. So there are advocates, for instance, who just spread the word for a project, or sponsors, or people who only moderate and triage issues. So yeah, but those are the main actors, I would say. Okay, next section about the good and the bad, I call it. Okay, let's start. Maintainer opportunities. Yeah, so first off, you can become a better developer. You just, you're motivated by yourself, looking at something, solving a problem. And of course, I was never a front-end guy, but through my work, I actually went into React and stuff like that. I would have never done this through my work, for instance, and plenty of other things like marketing and whatnot. It's also great for CV, I think, whenever you have a GitHub profile that you can put on your CV, and next job sees that, and they can look at it and see how awesome you are. So that's an opportunity. Visiting conferences for free, just like this time, actually. That was my first one, just in the same year that I started with my project in Moscow, which was awesome conference. Then there's also, of course, the opportunity for awards and reputation. Something that was quite nice was at some point there was a job offering, and they called my project cutting edge, just in the same sentence with Terraform and stuff. And more recently, not sure if you've heard about the ThoughtWorks technology radar. So ThoughtWorks is the company where Martin Fowler, the big Martin Fowler, works, the refactoring book author. And they have something where they basically recommend tools or evaluate them and write a little paragraph about them. And someday I saw it was on there. Actually, a friend made me know or informed me about it. Networking in France. This guy is sitting in the front row, so I like to think we got friends together. I even visited him in Bulgaria. And yeah, we've seen plenty of times already playing stuff and things. I would have never met him if it wasn't for the project. And of course, there's also the possibility to get some money, create a business. But you have to be lucky, I think. Lucky, not just lucky, of course. People do something with their knowledge, but still it takes quite some effort. On consumer side, what do we have? I mentioned that briefly already, low cost of ownership, no licensing cost. Security is also nice because you have a lot of people looking at that project and maybe discovering bugs. Yeah, Heartbleed, for instance, is one of those, just general, forget about Heartbleed. But people look at the code, they might find bugs, and everyone profits from that. Same goes for features. If someone implements a feature, for you it's basically just raising the version number, and there you go, you have a new feature that you can use. Bottom line of that, as a consumer, you can stand on the shoulder of giants. Yeah, you don't write your logging framework. You use Serilog, for instance, or at least me in the .NET space, or yeah, plenty of other libraries. Maintainer responsibilities. I don't really like the word, to be honest, because maintainers actually have no responsibility. We'll get into that later. But I think they put those responsibilities on themselves because they care, yeah? Because they are motivated. And what they have to do is, of course, development and research for what they're doing. I think that's obvious. Also application of best practices, because plenty of people will look at your code and you want to look not like a junior. That's fine, but I think you get what I mean. Documentation and website to write, so for other people to understand what this library, this framework is doing. regular updates, all the dependencies that you have, that's some work that you have to put in. Communication and promotion, like when I visit conferences. I also took vacation, for instance, one time to visit a conference. And yeah, there are also risks on consumer side. For instance, if you consume a project, you can also be made liable for the intellectual property that may have been violated. Yeah, so that is something worth knowing. Also, security is a risk. I think most people have heard about LeftPad, which was in NPM world, which was kind of, some malicious code got injected. That's a possibility because, let's say, as a maintainer, you don't have the same level of security auditing that a company might have. Yeah, I mean, not all, or some projects are not led that way. Lack of support. If you have an issue, the maintainer doesn't need to care, let's say, yeah. And abandonment. So there are plenty of examples, I think, depending on what ecosystem you're coming from, but a project just is there, it looks like what you want, but didn't have a commit for 2 years or something. That's a risk. But for maintainers, there are also some risks, yeah. And I hope you see the Burning Man that I have in the background. That's like, I hope you feel it, Burning Man. So one risk is no users. That was my first project that I had, and I worked for like 3 years on that. Barely any, like 30 stars, and then suddenly I stopped. And that was also when I switched to the next one. But then also entitlement and abuse. I would just read it because I'm not sure if people in the back can read it. So I got a comment on an extension for Visual Studio, and it says, unfortunately, it's not working out of the box. I set up new console, blah, 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 blah. Please document how to set this up, and I will gladly update the review. 1 star, that was just after 2,000 downloads, and was the first review. Yeah, and I was like, I mean, I think you can understand. I was putting a lot of work into that extension, and I have no idea what went wrong. I mean, there was also barely any information. And interestingly, I have a confession. I become somewhat of a stalker also in those situations, and I looked up where this person lives, and it was actually just 300 meters away from my home. So I was really thinking about buying some flowers. Another risk is, particularly in the .NET space, embrace, extend, extinguish. So that basically, I'm not sure if I should ask if everyone knows what this is about, but I'll try to make it short. So in the .NET space, there was one open source project, maintainer was working on it, and Microsoft basically copied it. And the story is a bit longer, but there was, this project died because Microsoft copied it. Another risk is being a victim of your own success. So particularly if you're a single person working on a project and then you get some traction, more people are using the project, then there's the risk that you get overwhelmed of issues, of users, and usually this raise in popularity doesn't increase the number of contributors. I mean, rarely it happens, but yeah, you have to be lucky. And last but not least, risk of burnout. Yeah, because like I said, developers care, maintainers, it's somewhat of their babies. Like, I think you can ask a lot of people and they will say that. And other companies profit from that, and then, here you have a star. What else things happen, I don't care. Yeah, and I've seen plenty of maintainers running into that, yeah, and then stopping for some time. Maybe they come back. Sometime they also just abandon the project completely. Takeaways so far. So I think there are little to no contributions back, particularly if you compare it to the 9 billion that are saved per year. And sustainability of projects is an issue because of that. I mean, logical consequence. Most are free riders. And we don't ask the question about maintenance, really. Because these projects might be free and open source, but someone has to pay, yeah? And usually the maintainer with their time. And that is also because, there's no business alignment, because you can use it for free. So the question is valid, why should I pay then? Tips for maintainers, some general advice, definitely bring passion. If you don't have passion, it doesn't make sense to start something. And also believing in yourself. Like when I started, I remember there were some people who said, "Oh, but there we have something already, and this is not invented here syndrome." And I just kept going, and yeah, it worked out fine. Yeah. Integration is important. That is one lesson that I learned from my first project, because I made some things, like special, and then it didn't integrate with other tools, and that was a big mistake. Yeah, I mean, if you break integration with other tools, then have a good reason for it. Also, have patience. With that thing with ThoughtWorks, for instance, that happened in a time where I didn't do anything in 3 weeks or something. I was really not motivated at all, but yeah, eventually it happened. And actually, I also asked them about looking into it, and they said, "Oh, we're not using it," and have no, yeah. But later it happened. For ramping up, it makes sense to, pick a license to make others aware what this project or how this project can be used. Also having a good elevator pitch in the README so that people know what is your vision or what can the project do already. That's worth communicating. Contribution guidelines, that part that usually no one reads, yeah, but I still think it's good to have. I actually spent some time explaining people what it takes. So it's like an excerpt from the talk that I'm giving today. Code of conduct is nice to have, or should be there. I hope people read that. Security policy is also good to have, so people have a way to contact you if there are security issues. And I think that's the most important one, create community spaces. That could be Slack, Discord, something else. I don't know, there's something else, no. So some place where people of the community that hopefully is built can communicate with each other and help each other. At some point, it's also nice getting some free stuff, open source licenses. Azure and AWS, they can give you credits if you want to run something in cloud. We at JetBrains, we give out all products packs. There's SignPath code signing. That's actually the company I was working at before, or a mother company. So they do code signing and all kinds of CI/CD services. Yeah. As far as coding practices go, so at first it makes sense. Don't write too many tests. Again, that's my personal opinion. Have some high-level tests that also illustrate some examples of how the framework or tool or whatever is used to test that. Maintain a changelog so that people upgrading know what happened, and it's also nice to have a history of what features got added. Then that is based on a blog post by John Skeet, who said always start with version 1.x. I can tell you he's not wrong. Yeah, because I was on 0 point something for a long time, and everyone said, "Oh, this is not production ready, right?" And I didn't break anything, so I didn't have the need. But yeah, start with version 1. I immediately jumped to 0.5 then, so that people really feel that it's production ready. At the same time, also try to follow semantic versioning. I say try because it's not a bad thing if accidentally you break it. I mean, that's just natural. And set up CI/CD pipelines, yeah, so that you can say for sure that it works on, fresh environments. And don't carry old weight. That is something that I see very frequently from maintainers. Other people use their library, and they're still very behind. Like in .NET world, they would use .NET Framework, something. And because of that, maintainers cannot upgrade to just .NET 6, for instance. Yeah, and I say break quickly, because otherwise you're putting the same requirements as Microsoft would have on your own, on yourself. Yeah, I mean, if Microsoft says we don't want to break things and we want to be backwards compatible until the eternity, then of course, but for an open source project, yeah. Telemetry is nice to decide in which direction you want to go. So for instance, I use this to know, okay, for instance, it makes less sense to invest in VS Code integration, but in Rider and Visual Studio, and Azure Pipelines is the most used CI/CD service, for instance. yeah. But GDPR, you know. In terms of promotion, the usual suspects: post on Twitter, Reddit, LinkedIn, try to help people on Discord, Slack, Stack Overflow. We at JetBrains, we have a monthly newsletter, so people also write us their blog posts or their new projects so that we can include it in the newsletter, which is nice. Pinging community leaders and stand-ups. So I just want to ask, how many people are for .NET? No one. Oh, 1, 2. Yeah. Okay, but yeah, I think whatever ecosystem you're in, I think there are similar things. Applying for conferences and meetups is also nice, particularly meetups, because you can, you know, test out your idea and give it a few tries and then improve on that. Online live shows, we also have that actually at JetBrains. I should show you this because I'm very proud of it. Open source power-ups is like a series where we pick maintainers from different projects and we try to help them in 3 different ways, like financially, contributing a bit to the project, and also have the webinar with them. So stuff like this also exists. Let's go back. And now content. About what can you write? How can you get developers attracted? Yeah. One thing is to write about performance. Another thing is to write about Fluent APIs. Also, Martin Fowler blogged about this. You looked it up sometime recently, right? That was way in the past. And minimal APIs, particularly in .NET space. And James Newton King, who's quite a famous person in the .NET space, called it "find developer catnip." Yeah, so to make them, you know, all excited. So yeah, that's worth writing about to get people's attraction. I'm terrible at front end and all things websites and whatnot. I usually always think of Linus Torvalds, who said if he has to write a nice UI to escape a lonely island, he couldn't. Yeah, same with me. But this is a tip, I think, for you know, not just if you're a maintainer or something. It's so funny. Let's start. Docusaurus is the framework that I found to write documentation. And since then, just through my friends that I have, I got like 2 people always saying, "Oh, I'm so thankful that you told me about this Docusaurus thing, and we're using it at the company, and my boss now likes me and whatnot." Yeah. So yeah, that's a static site generator to create a website basically and write documentation. Markdown snippets is nice if you want to have code examples in your Markdown files and to sync them, so they will always be compilable. Algolia is nice if you want to integrate search into a website, which is a service, but I think you can also, there are also self-host examples. Giscast to include GitHub, bless you, to integrate GitHub comments into the page, and plenty of others. I think you will see this also in the recording. I think it's worth checking out. And for the website, I actually could show you. Yeah, so this is the website, and I think this is, I mean, for my for my conditions, it's like mind blowing. Once I was finished, I thought, okay, I cannot click. Let's go back. Yeah, that was interesting. Once I released a new website, it was nice to see the metrics about how perception changed, how many new viewers, that they are not bouncing anymore and stuff like that. And that also leads me to the next point: motivation and health. So first off, it's good to reflect on goals. What do you want to achieve with that stuff? That goes hand in hand with celebrating wins. I do this not frequently enough, to be honest, and that could include like tweeting more often about features, yeah, or giving a shout out to sponsors that you already have, that stuff. It's still important to prioritize self-care, because all this stuff is not worth it if you don't feel good about it. But that's exactly what I meant. A lot of people, a lot of maintainers kind of feel this responsibility, and then they're like in a, they're getting sucked into it. And sometimes they don't even like working on those projects, but they still do it, yeah, because they created it. So also learn to say no if people ask all kinds of questions about features. It's like, if it was that easy just by asking to get a feature, of course, why not? Yeah, but yeah, definitely learn to say no. Even feel free to ignore. I do this more and more often, because more and more people can ask, and I think you should not feel bad about it, even if you just close an issue. You could be a little bit more friendly than I am if you not just add a tag or something, if you have a template to give a more reasonable or more friendly response. But yeah, I think it's fine to ignore. And vent with friends, just like I have this guy here in the front. Iceberg phenomenon is good to know, because there are plenty of people having bugs, feature requests, complaints, all kinds of entitlement, but the majority gets stuff done. Yeah, those are the people that you usually don't see. And I had lots of people, they tell me what semantic versioning is, although I know, but it was just an accident. They say this or that is strange. You have a lot of that. And now you could say, is that so? Are there people who get stuff done, or is it really just this angry mob of users or something? But yeah, with metrics, again, it's cool to kind of track that, to see how many people are taking a look at the documentation, or how many people are downloading the package. And with that, I don't know, where is it? Per day, 3,100 downloads. I think if there's one person per day complaining about it, that's still fine. Yeah. Okay. Comparing to competitors could be an option to also kind of track where you're at, and to motivate yourself. And now, yeah, financial incentives. So I think that can be interesting at some point, because, like I said, motivation over time might fade, and it's better to make this project, or to make a project sustainable, and financial incentives are one thing that you can give to your users. For instance, by having an example repository that is only available to people who sponsor. By the way, this is also that someone as a contributor can help with. If you like a project and you want them to, earn a few things or something with that, then you can also help setting up such an example repository. Other projects use open core with add-ons, or what's also quite easy for a maintainer to put a logo of a sponsor on the website or README. Some people also do stickers and swag. Yeah, I can't design shit. Faster issue tracking for companies who want to get their issues done more quickly, or even to help the maintainer work on aligned features. That's also an opportunity. The ultimate, let's say, how do you call it? The ultimate option is to go dual license. Yeah, and I think a lot of people are also doing that, because they don't have any luck with all the rest. Yeah, so to allow people using it, if they also have non-commercial projects, but for commercial projects you would have to pay. Okay, tips for sorry, for consumers. There's something that I call basic appreciation, and that is because I think maintainers, if they have a project and you consume it, you're already getting quite a lot of their time. Yeah, of course it doesn't multiply like per person or something. That's the great thing about software. But from my point of view, it doesn't hurt to give the project a star, for instance, to follow social media accounts, upvote and share their content if you like it, and particularly if it's helpful to you, if you love it. Giving ratings where possible, not like the other time, what I got, so preferably 5 stars or something, because I think even if a feature is not there that you would love, I think giving less stars or something does motivate a maintainer to work on something like that. Yeah. Spreading the word is cool because this is like a bit like a snowball system. Yeah, the more people know about something, there's a bigger chance that some of these may be able to convince their company to sponsor a project or something. Okay, interaction don'ts. So what should you not do? Why is my issue not fixed? Why is my PR not merged? This issue took a whole evening to fix, like people expressing their emotions. And I usually always say, I don't want them, I have my own. I'm just telling it myself. Is this project dead? Also, I have to say it, this happened to me the last time. Like last year, my grandfather passed away, and just like 2 weeks that I didn't do anything, and then people come along and say, oh yeah, this project is dead, right? And this is, I don't know, weird. There are different ways of approaching that. Maybe saying, do you need help or something? Yeah, or are you looking for a new maintainer? And of course, you're doing it wrong. Bottom line of that, what I'm asking myself is always, okay, do you want your money back? Yeah, because no one paid any money. But it's important to realize there's no SLA, no service license agreement between a consumer and a maintainer. And maintainer could well just enjoy their time with family, friends, or whatnot. Okay. Who knows Breaking Bad? Okay, who wants to translate what DBAA means? Don't be shy. Okay, then I will translate it. So DBAA, one of my favorite series. Don't be an I think that's in a nutshell how you can say it. But what could you do instead? Definitely follow contribution guidelines. Read documentation and FAQ because usually that isn't written because they just felt so, but maintainers know that might help a large portion of our users. So go and try to read documentation and maybe search for it. If you contribute, that is something that plenty of maintainers say quite often, that PRs don't match the quality, let's say, of the rest of the code. That could be that PRs just break tests immediately, or that you see that the way something was fixed is really just to get that issue fixed, because otherwise it violates all the whole style of the rest of the code and whatnot. So yeah, these happen. Also not for every PR, of course, but I would say that's a good thing to do. Yeah, remembering the advantage, I mentioned that a couple of times, so maintainers already shared, so it would be nice to keep that in mind when you approach them. And remember the license. So here's another one from Breaking Bad, as is. So particularly MIT, I think, has it, this as is, and in quotes, yeah, there's no responsibility afterwards whatsoever once a maintainer put out their work. You can also support with time. That is like helping other consumers, particularly in those community spaces like Slack, Discord, and Twitter, maybe also in the issues, or speak at meetups, at local meetups about a project that you like. Help to investigate and triage issues, because that also takes quite some time sometimes. If someone reports something and you have no idea where it's coming from, it can take quite a while. Or to say, okay, yeah, I'm seeing the same issue on my machine, but maybe with a better reproduction steps, or even with a test or something. Even a test can be contributed. Yeah, that's fine as well. You could also become a contributor. Yeah, maybe even take ownership for a portion of that system, and all of that is basically just to increase the truck factor of the project. Yeah, that's a big improvement as well, because if one person loses interest, then you might still be there knowing about the project, and you don't have to fork it or completely replace it with an alternative, maybe even a paid alternative. Yeah, those are all possibilities. Personal donations is an interesting topic because plenty of people, I think, are saying, well, but this is for work, why should I invest in the project, right? I see this a little bit different. I will tell you why. So first off, some projects, I think, make work more enjoyable, yeah? And with some projects, you might even be able to improve your work performance reviews. So maybe you get a better salary or something. I think situations like these exist. In fact, there are plenty of blog posts about this. Well, not plenty, but at least one I found. So maybe it's worth even donating on a personal basis. It doesn't have to be a lot. But you know, if plenty of people, I mean, it's a quantity in this case. Yeah, if plenty of people are doing that, that's still something. But of course, the even better way would be if you can convince your company to sponsor for a project that you're using for a product that makes a lot of money or something. And I have to say, you find this blog post very quickly also if you search for a convince company, blah, blah, blah. So I will just make a summary of that. Something that you should do at first is find the correct person to talk about this, to invest into open source projects that you're using. Then don't operate on just altruism. So companies usually, I mean, it's not like, oh yeah, we give some money. That's usually not how it works. But instead, you can craft a story around how this project is saving money, how it's saving time, or how it's generating actually more money. Yeah. So a story around that. For instance, also, let's go back for a moment to say, and I just said it. What happens if that project isn't there anymore? Yeah, if you have to fork it or switch to an alternative, and that takes 2 months or something, then it might be worth, you know, giving a little so to keep it up and running. Even if there are paid alternatives, let's say there's a paid alternative which costs $20 per month, you know, just an example, then it would still make more sense to pay $5 per month and hope that this project is still running than paying 20. I mean, I think it's an obvious calculation. And yeah, at a company, for instance, you could try to make them, you know, create open source grants. That's something that Microsoft is also doing. So they have like, you know, a certain budget, and then they have votings about what project should receive the grant. Or what I've also seen, particularly with Open Collective, is to give out employee gift cards. So the employees themselves, they decide what project was really helpful during my job, and that is where I want to spend some money on. Okay, I forgot about this slide. This is pretty new for me as well. So questions that should be answered in that outline if you approach someone in the company is, what does the project do? Where is it used? What value do we get for using it? But also, who receives the money? And I'm not sure. Yeah, I think with what values do you get? I'm not sure. Let's just unfold the whole question page. Then I know better what I'm talking about. Okay, so who receives the money? So usually the maintainer, but also how is the money used? Some maintainers actually pay for a service, so maybe even on that. Yeah, what does the company get in return? Again, logo on the website is quite easy. That is also something that I will say this again. If you have a project that you like, that you really like, and it's helping you in your job, and the creator doesn't have a sponsorships account or something just yet, then just approach them. Ask them if they're open for that, if they want to create that, and then if they would just put the logo on the README page, and I think no maintainer would say no. Yeah. What paid alternatives exist? That's a point that I just talked about also, and which other companies are sponsoring. So it's sometimes quite nice if you see a project is being sponsored by, let's say, Microsoft. to have your logo of your company just next to Microsoft's logo. Yeah, that's nice. As some takeaways, I would say have compassion with the maintainers. They're putting in a lot of work already. There are plenty of nice users. I know this, but those those bad situations still can stick for a while. Yeah. So have compassion. Try to help in whatever way you can. Make it easy for them. If you have feature requests, bugs to fix, create tests for that and stuff like that. Try to increase the truck factor in your own interest, actually. Yeah. Again, when a project gets abandoned, you don't win, and maybe even help them to improve the business alignment so that they get something out of that as well. That's it. What I want to say is, this is the second time that I'm giving this talk. There are plenty other great figures, at least in the .NET space that I know, who are awesome at speaking about this. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks. Any questions? Yeah, there's one question. I can't hear you, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
First of all, IntelliJ is my best friend. Second of all, I want to ask you a question more from a contributor perspective. When I started off looking for open source projects, I didn't know where to look for. So can you give a little bit of insight on how do we look for projects to contribute, and how do we evaluate whether a certain project is really good for us as a contributor?
Yeah, I mean, I know for .NET, some up for grabs, for instance, is one that is not just for .NET, if I remember correctly. But if you want to do this as an exercise, then sure, I think just browse through a few. But in general, I think it makes sense to contribute to a project that you actually use, because then there's also some motivation for yourself to contribute. Or a topic that interests you. I mean, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be using it in a company or something, but at least something that is really interesting to you. And if that is, image processing or something, then I think you will find the library for your particular ecosystem in some way. Yeah.